Was recorded live for CALLERLAB's 20th annual convention. This is tape number 21, Partnership.
Are we going now? Thank you very much for being the technical end of it. This is the partnership session. Please address all your microphones, all your questions on the microphone, not all your microphones on the question. For the benefit of the tape, we went through this preamble ahead of time. We're not going to go through it again. On my left, we have Sue and Lem Gravelle from Jennings, Louisiana. Lem started calling in 1960. He calls every week for 3 clubs and does plus weekends and things. When you say plus weekends, I mean that's an additive. It's not a plus weekend. It's an additive weekend. Okay. He calls whatever they require on the weekends. That's maybe a better staff member of English Mountain, Tennessee. He's a district supervisor for a power company. That means he works full-time as well as calling a lot. I mean, 3 nights a week is a lot when you're working. He's been married 38 years to the same woman, and I don't blame him. He has a married son and 1 grandchild, so he's been in the field for quite a number of years. On my right, we have a couple that is no stranger to any of you. If you've ever bought a record and worked with these two, you know that both Peggy, and what was your name again? Bill Heyman, are a real charming couple. And they have a very unique arrangement together. I'm not going to tell you too much about it. They have been involved. Let's see, if I got that in here, I've got it here somewhere. When I read their resume, it is tremendous. It is the most interesting resume I have ever read about a square dance couple. Bill, you gave me that. What did I do? Here it is. Boy, I need a sticky finger. Here we go. They both have university degrees. They both learned to dance in Europe. They started many, many years ago in 1978. He started calling in 1980. He published a Caller's Cure Corner. That's a magazine, Caller's Cure Corner. Is that right?
No, that was when we started the company.
That was the original name of the company. Pardon me, Caller's Cure Corner. That was in 1982. You know them now as Supreme Audio. You also know them as Hanhurst Tapes. So they are very involved in the business. But the business is Peggy's. And that's all I'm going to tell you about it. They're going to tell you the rest. So that's the point. Terri and I will just tell you, this is my wife, Terri. We've been married for 44 years, 2 married children, 4 grandchildren. We call for 4 clubs in our area, and we have 3 classes that we do every year. We have been involved. I worked for the federal government for 44 years, retired 2 years ago. And I'm doing exactly the same thing as I was doing then for 38 years. I'm doing exactly the same calling amounts and everything else. So it's a relief to be a full-time caller. Now, I'm going to ask a question. We have a radio mic here, and I'm going to start with Sue rather than Lem. How did she get him into square dancing? This may be of interest to you. You may be able to relate to it.
In 1960, Jennings was having its first square dance round, and my sister worked for a doctor, and they were going to ask the different nurses if they would bring someone to square dancing. So my sister said to me, why don't we play a trick on the men? Why don't you tell Lem that Hike, her husband, really wants to go, but won't go unless Lem goes? And so I did that, and she told him that Lem really wanted to go to square dancing, but was afraid that he'd laugh unless he would go. So I went home and said, Lem, we're going to square dancing tomorrow night. Hike really wants to go. And he said, square dancing? You have got to be kidding. There's no days I'm going to a square dance. I said, Lem, you play basketball, you bowl, you golf, in baseball. I do everything with you watching either through the fence or up in the stands. So will you just go one time and see if you like it? So he said, well, maybe so. So the next night he came down, and I couldn't believe he had on the holiest pair of blue jeans he's had. I said, where are you going? He said, didn't you say we're going to a square dance? I said, well, okay. So we went. He fell in love with it. The next week I had the flu. He went without me. And that's been the rest of the story.
I'm going to ask Peggy to tell them how they got in here.
Okay. We were living in Europe, and we lived in Europe from 1969 until 1980, and when we moved to Zurich, Switzerland in 1977, we were, as a lot of expatriates we're looking for something social to do. Our lives at that time centered around Bill's involvement as a vice president of a large New York bank in their international area. And, of course, our 3 children, who were all in elementary school at the international school at the time. There was a couple who also had kids at the school who were also expatriates working for General Electric in Switzerland. And they had learned to square dance in California and had come with their records and equipment, and they were eager to start a group, and the young man was eager to become a caller. He's here, and I don't know if he's in this session, but he's certainly at this meeting, and he can take full credit, actually, for getting, he and his wife, for getting Bill and myself involved. Walt and Vicki Cooley were our teachers and our callers and our mentors, and we met with a group of other expatriates and friends every Tuesday night, and every so often we'd finish learning something, and Walt would say, well, you've just danced a tip, and we'd all look at each other and we'd say, what's a tip? And at one point he said, you've just finished basics, and we'd say, what's basics? And little by little we learned the lingo and we learned the jargon, but this was basically a social opportunity for us to do something that was not bank related, was something that we did just for fun, for exercise, and the people that we danced with became very important parts of our lives. And when we got back to the States, we realized we'd stepped into an entirely different world. That comes later, probably.
Bill didn't fight it.
Bill didn't fight it.
Bill
Bill
didn't
didn't fight it at all.
There's-
As a matter of fact, Bill really enjoyed it, and he really sort of got interested in the calling angle of it. He played the guitar years and years ago, and he'd been into singing, and it looked kind of interesting. And he borrowed Walt's equipment, and he borrowed some records, and our kids fell asleep to the sounds of various singing calls as Bill practiced in the living room a lot.
Rather than have myself tell anything about how I got into it, because I enlarge on things that Terri doesn't like, I'm going to let Terri tell her how she trapped me into square dancing.
Well, this was rather different for us. We hadn't been married, about 4 years, and we had 2 little kids. And our neighbors came over and said, we got to know them. We were having coffee one evening, and they said, we've just done the most interesting thing this year. We've joined a square dance club, and we'd like you to come. And I thought, that sounds okay. But Martin said, I heard you say, when we got home, he said, I heard you say that we were going square dancing. And if you think I'm going square dancing, you got another thing coming. And I thought about this, and I was really quite upset. And when the day came she came over in the morning, and she said, maybe you should wear short heel shoes, and Martin should wear a long-sleeve shirt so you don't feel out of place. And I thought, oh, God, how can I tell her that we're not going to go? So when Martin came home at lunchtime, I said, you know what, we are going square dancing. And he said, oh, no, you're not. I'm not going. You can go. And I thought, oh, well, I really put the pressure on. I said, for one night in your life, you could come with me. I always go with you. So
That's the pressure she used.
So we did go, and I couldn't believe it. By the time about the third tip that we were dancing, Martin said, this is fun, and I didn't realize it was like this. And before we knew it, we had to pay for the next year, and he'd already put his $5 down, so I couldn't believe it.
I'd put the $5 down before I told her it was fun. But we have a series of questions here, and how do you avoid the push-pull that you have with your families? The expression we've used, how do you avoid feeling like a rubber band when you're working with your husband and wife, having full-time jobs, children at home with weekly clubs and everything else? How do you arrange priorities and things of that nature? What makes it work for you? How do you do that? Which of you want to be first this time?
Well, I tell you, I was one of those wives that Liam got real involved in the square dancing. I had a full-time job. I had a very ill mother, a child in school, and I felt like most wives feel. I'm sure a lot of men feel the same way, but a lot of us women put the extra pressure on ourselves that we feel guilty if we leave the children at home too much or different things. And so Liam and I sat down and we had a real long talk, and I said, I cannot go on like this. I feel like I'm being pulled in every direction. And I said, I really enjoy square dancing and I really want to be with you. And I said, let's talk about this. So we came up with the decision that when Kent was young and growing up, I would go when I felt like I could go. At that time he was calling on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and we were traveling on Fridays and Saturdays. And I just felt like I couldn't do all of that. So we ended up that I would go 1 week on Monday and then skip the Tuesday. Then on Wednesday I washed clothes and collapsed. On Thursdays, I would usually go because that was right there in Jennings. But I also had a unique situation. My mother was back on her feet, and my parents were very, very good in taking care of all 10 of their grandchildren. So I had a unique situation. And after we discussed it, when I felt like I wanted to go, I went. And when I didn't, I stayed at home. And then after Kent got out of school, it was a different story. I go everywhere.
One thing I might add to this, one thing that helped is in those days we didn't really have to worry a whole bunch. A lot of times if we went to, say, Lafayette, it was a recreation center, and right next door was a ballpark, and they had ball games going, and we were able to, our son and several of the other children from the dancers could go over and sit and watch the ball game. After the game was over, they'd come back into the hall. Can't do that today. You just can't let your kids do that. So it's a different situation. But there was no worries back in that time when our son was growing up about kidnappers or that type of stuff. The kids would go watch a ball game. They'd come back to the hall about the time dance was over.
I think I'm going to give each of these people a mic here to say something about their arrangements they have with each other, because it is very interesting.
Okay, you go first.
When we started dancing and calling, our kids were young. We came back to the States, and everybody was in school. And I think the first year that we were in New Jersey, it was a babysitter year still, and so when Bill was, but Bill wasn't calling that much, and so I really did want to be involved, and we were doing everything together. I would say at that point it was certainly one class night and maybe another dance during the week, and we got babysitters, and off we went. As the kids got older and didn't need babysitters, we could go more frequently. But then the guilt set in. They were young. They were young enough. They were old enough to stay by themselves, but young enough so that we didn't feel so good about that. Just from a family point of view, they took lessons with some other children of dancers that we were friendly with, and they danced actively during their student year, and then maybe for another year after that, when they became a lot more independent and realized that this was really not what they wanted to do. It wasn't for all the reasons that young teenagers decide not to do it, which is a whole other session, I'm sure. At that point, I needed to make some decisions about where I was able to spend my time, and of course, also at that point, our business started to grow. And also at that time, Bill's calling started to grow. We pushed and pulled for a long time. There were nights when, there were weeks when suddenly what we thought was maybe a two-night week became a 4-night week, occasionally a 5-night week, occasionally a 2-night week with a weekend. And the whole time this was happening, the business was growing. Bill was also working at the bank. He was commuting an hour and a half each way into New York City with all the hassles and fatigue that entails. I don't know what else.
Just perhaps a quick comment on that. There was a point in 1983 or 84 that our calendar was really, really out of control. And I'm sure that many of you have gone through that. You're a new caller, you get off to a good start, you become reasonably popular in your local area. That's before they get to really know you and don't hire you anymore. And I got popular in the area, and I didn't pay attention to communicating with Peggy and doing the calendar together. And we ended up, at one point, once again, because of the career and everything else, and the business was really starting to explode at that point in time, where calling really became a burden. And there was more than a couple of nights that I ended up taking $50 or $60 taxi rides home from the city because I was working late at the office, but still had to get to my mainstream class or to a club dance. So that became burdensome, not from a financial point of view, but just, it put you in a tense mood, if you will, to arrive at a dance last minute by taxi. And the fact is that we finally learned, the way we have resolved that is, we plan our calendar together, and we use our regular, 3-year calendar, and I just simply take a blue highlighter, a square dance calling date where I am on, where I have to perform, is done in blue. Square dance related things such as callers council meetings or conventions of things are highlighted in yellow. And when we flip open our calendar together, and we do that at 11 o'clock at night every couple of months, we'll say, let's look at the calendar. And we just flip it open, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at that calendar and know whether or not you're going to be happy that month. If blue is shining pretty much through the month, you've got a real problem, because we do have family and other obligations and so forth. We've learned to really cut that down just due to our move up to New Hampshire now. Obviously, I've literally canceled all my calling dates, and I've completed my New Jersey calling obligations except for next summer, and we'll be hopefully starting again in New Hampshire. But the key here, and the only point here, is to communicate that you really have to talk jointly together with each other to determine how much do we want to call, how much do we want to travel. Yeah, so next point. Sorry, anyway. And to really make that decision, we also mark in what we call reserve days on our calendar. We'll look at a month, and it'll look pretty good, and we'll just simply write reserve across 2 or 3 3-day weekends and simply say, no more dates, or if we make a date, we really have to think carefully about it. We need some freewheeling time.
I think Terry's on next.
Well, we really found it, when Martin first started calling, and then he got really quite busy in that, and we had 2 little children. But fortunately, we live in a university town. So what we did, and Martin worked up at the university, so what we decided to do was get 2 students, and we gave them board and room with the understanding that they would babysit for us. So this meant that, and they were very good. We had some very good students that became like family to us, but they were old enough that they could look after the children while we were away square dancing.
We have heard stories since.
But really and truly, we found that was the best way to handle it. And as they got older, and Martin, we'd go out on weekends, do weekends, we had very good parents that came and helped us out. It wasn't until, when our son got to be about 13, and it really hit home. Martin, on a fall night, on a September night, was packing his equipment, and he was going out, and Brian was helping him pack his equipment in the car, and he said, well, Dad, we'll see you in the spring. And it really hit home.
I nearly hung up the mic.
And we had a long, long talk about it, and then we had a long talk with Brian, and we talked about what square dancing gave us and what a good move it was, and how, I said, look at your friends. What are their mom and dad doing? Are they in the bar? There's all sorts of things that they're doing, but are they doing things they like in that? But this was something that we had to deal with as a family, and it wasn't easy to do. But I think now, as Brian's grown older, he understands it all, but there was some pretty hard years ahead.
He was a very bitter youngster for a few years, but we did institute one thing in our family that we did find worked very well for us. Our meal times were always our council time. Our children always sat down with us at our meals, and if we had any subject that they wanted to bring up, we wanted to bring up, we sat and talked as reasonable people. We never said to our kids, you will do this, and never give them a reason. And if they wanted to do something, they had to make a case of it. There were a few cases when we had to say, no, we don't agree with what you're doing, give them our reasons, and stick to it. We always agreed with each other. If we had a difference of opinion, we talked about it privately. Came to a conclusion, brought it back to our children, and made sure that they knew why. And I think that's important if you're raising a family and you're involved in calling, is that you behave in a reasonable, rational manner.
Well, one thing I always looked at is all these callers and their wives that had no family, and I thought, gee, aren't they lucky? Because this worry of a family is really because family's number one. I always felt, and I always feel, and we both feel that way.
Perhaps some of you have questions. Perhaps some of you are raising children, and you have something you'd like to bring up, or something of another nature. It's your turn now. Have you any questions you want to ask? Boy, they're quiet. Have you got one?
Well, I don't really have a question, but maybe just to share with the group how Bill and I worked it in terms of family. In 1984, Bill left the bank. He left the commuting. The commute now consisted of a pair of bedroom slippers and a flight of stairs up or 2 flights down when he rolled out of bed at his well-rested appointed hour. No sleep deficit for him. Anyway, but we are, of course, very involved in the business. The business is, I'll allude to something that Martin said before. I don't know if this is the time or not. Okay. Business is definitely a partnership. It is Peggy and Bill and Peggy, however you slice it. We are very much in this together. I happen to have the controlling 55% interest. But anyway, and I do manage the business day to day. We have a staff now of about 8 people. We have new people hired for New Hampshire, of course. And Bill writes the catalog. He deals with the tax issues, the governmental interface, the insurance, the setting up relationships with some suppliers. I handle the day-to-day purchasing, the staff management, the telephone work, and a lot of the technical detail that comes through on the telephone. I have to tell you that I've learned all the technical stuff from Bill. I have an undergraduate degree in sociology and a master's degree in psychiatric social work, which of course prepares me eminently well to run an audio equipment. Okay.
Now do you understand?
Now you know. So if anybody orders a record and I ask, how do you feel about that, you'll know where I'm coming from. Anyway, but I have learned an awful lot, and I learn something new every single day from Bill, from my customers, from my staff, and from my colleagues and all of you, my peers. Go ahead.
The key, yeah.
No, go ahead.
The key here really is that we have a very different kind of partnership. We've chatted privately, and of course some of our very good friends are here, and they know that we have some radically different approaches to life and things. But you really have to decide for yourself what's comfortable for you. We know what's comfortable for us, and we really are very good partners. We're married 30 years, and it really works very, very well. Calling is my activity. You do not see Peggy chugging behind me carrying the coffee pot. That has never happened, and that probably never will happen, because Peggy has her own personality, Peggy has her own activities, and the other thing is we've already spent a 12-hour day together. I don't know how many of you work full-times with your partners, but it is a long day. You can think of some of the tensions that might come up, even in a good marriage, and if you work together literally 24 hours a day, there are moments when we're probably happy that we're a floor or two away from each other, but we really do work very, very well together, and we found that we can change that distance between ourselves, both physically and perhaps even mentally at times, that, she really has her assigned jobs, and she does her jobs, and at the end of her workday, she's frankly exhausted, just like Sue is exhausted. If you've done a full-time day job, regardless of whether it happens to be with your spouse or not, you're exhausted, and you may not want to chug out and do the calling as do the assisting, if you will, as the spouse. The other thing is, in maybe conflict with a lot of general attitudes that prevail, Well, whereas round dance cuers tend to be hired as a couple because it is a couple dance, I have never perceived square dance calling as a partner's contract in the sense of that they're hiring Peggy at the same time. If they want to hire Peggy, they should offer her a contract. Okay, she has a lot to offer them. I make that, as, if you will, as a bit of a wisecrack. The fact is that they're hiring me as the caller, and Peggy comes when it suits her socially. And maybe you can just pick up on that, just a quick comment on the social side of why you go to dances.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm take too much time. Okay. Very, very briefly, I love to dance, and I love the people, and I thoroughly enjoy being with other callers and their partners and whatever, and I really like being with my friends. And I find it much more difficult than perhaps a lot of you do to go into a room, and certainly more difficult than Bill does, as I'm sure you all know, to go into a room where I don't know anybody and define myself, make those people my friends, say, "Hi, I'm Peggy Heyman, and I want to be your friend." I did that a lot as a child. Martin asked me a question last night about this, and I commented that I had done a lot of moving as a child. Before we came in, I did the count, and while a lot of these moves were in the same city, I moved 15 times and changed schools a lot before I was 23 years old. When Bill and I got married, we have moved 9 times in the last 30 years. Each of those moves has involved redefining myself, making new friends, putting my kids in new schools, doing all that stuff that I'm sure a lot of you understand. We're facing another move now, which is our choice. I hope and we're looking forward to it. We're excited about it. But one of the reasons that I decided not to go every night was because there were a lot of clubs that for which Bill was calling where I really didn't know anybody, and it was harder for me. And the other thing, on the other hand, was that the business was growing, and I really needed that time to do my work. Anyway.
I think we finally got a question from the floor. You must use the mic and state who you are. Who are you?
I'm Gail Seastrom. I don't have a question. I have a comment on this. I don't go to every dance with Mike either, but when I do go to the dance with him, I get paid. I am not contracted by the club, but I am paid by Mike because I take care of all of his bookings, all of his mail, all of his travel arrangements. His clothes are clean and ironed, and his gas is in the car, and the map is ready. Now, I know that's a really radical statement, but it is what works for us because he values the job that I do at the dance. And sometimes I don't get paid a lot because maybe I didn't do too good a job. But he does share that with it. This is not our total income. This is a part-time job for Mike. This is an avocation. So this is how we have chose to make the balance in our life. And it works for us. When I don't go to the dance, I don't get paid. So just like you said, they don't contract to have Peggy come call the dance, but I feel that I do contribute to the success of his dance.
That's a very interesting concept. I might add that what is being done there is not just a personal thing, it's also a tax advantage. Am I correct? You maybe should consider that, girls. Become a tax deduction.
Well, I go to the dances with Lim. I go all the time now. And I do not feel that I am a doormat. I go because it is a couple organization, and it is a couple's deal with Lim and I. He loves the calling, and I love the dancing. I dance every night of the week that I go. I dance on the weekends. And if some people have trouble finding a partner, they don't have club members like we have, who some wife always has an ailment. Go get Sue, she'll dance. And I don't mind. I like it. And like with Gail, it's not our living. And maybe sometimes when it's not your living, you can be a little bit more independent. If Lim gets a dance like he did Wichita's Festival, well, I wanted to go to Wichita Festival. So they flew him up. He took his dance money and flew me. So we had a weekend together. So I think it's kind of like raising children. No two women can do it alike. and what works for me might not work for you, but you know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So after 33 years, it's not broken, we ain't going to try and fix it.
I might just add to that comment that looks like we have kind of on the panel contrasting situations, and that Sue has probably made all but maybe 1% of the dances that I've called since I've been calling. And that time was when our child was young. When he got older, involved in sports in high school, there was actually one club on Friday night while he was the quarterback of the football team. For 4 years, I took a leave of absence from that club to watch him play in the fall, to watch him play every game. And so we were able to work it that way. But she does go to every dance that I call, especially now. At that time, there were some she didn't go to. I appreciated her going because who else would tell me whether or not I called a good dance? You know, I mean, but...
You know that saying about whatever you do, don't get in an argument with your husband on the way to the dance? Well, that sucker that wrote that was a man, because there's no truth to that. Many times...
How many? I got to ask you. I got a question of that, and I say amen. How many of you actually do not have a discussion with your wife and or husband going to the? I'm curious. You're like, oh, I don't believe you. It's nice to see that because it's a nice thing to try and practice. But in principle, I don't think it does work. We always have discussions about one thing or another. Sometimes they're valuable. Sometimes we wish they hadn't happened.
Listen, many times on the way to the dance, I could pinch his head off and tell God he died. But then when we get to the dance and he opens that trunk and gets that equipment, we get that other face out.
I love it.
Peggy and I have had some of our finest arguments on the way to dances. I mean, I'm talking class arguments.
Well, is this on or not? Well, Martin and I, we call it's a domestic, and it can be a little domestic or it can be a big domestic. And believe me, we've had big domestics.
It's sometimes a disastrous domestic.
But, you know, I think that we've all go through this, and we come to an agreement. And as Sue said, when you get to the dance, you put a smile on your face, and the people there.
Sometimes.
Well, we like to put a smile on our face, and we see the people coming through the door, and we're happy to see them, and we realize that they've had their day too that may have been that good, and we can help them have a better day and a good evening.
I think it takes us the first tip usually to get over a discussion. We get up there and we say, Alaman left and a right and left grand, and away we go. That first Alaman left sometimes comes out a little solid. I was going to ask Terri to talk a little bit about our kids coming up and the other things that happened with them. Did I stymie you?
Yes, you did.
Our son, when he was 14, became a rock drummer.
No. I don't know if that was worse than being a caller. No, I didn't mean to say that. But
I tell you right now, you wouldn't recognize him.
But believe me, with the two of them in the house, it wasn't easy.
Our cat loves square dance music. He used to come down and lay beside the speaker. That's fine. When our son started his orchestra practicing, we could never find the cat.
Anyway, for a long time, I was a bit like Sue. I didn't go with Martin. I stayed home and protected the rock band. No, I looked at...
Protected the house.
But actually it all came out. I think that when you're... The values that you give your children when they're little, and I was glad that I was at home when they were little, and I talked to them a lot. And I talked to them about square dancing because I liked it, and we tried to tell them that it was a good thing. And now Brian is an entirely different boy, and he does believe that square dancing is a good thing, and he does look at his mom and dad and say, well, we've met many friends, we've made many friends, and that's the pluses of square dancing, is the people you meet and the friends you make and the places you travel.
One thing I'll say about Brian, he did put another load on my shoulders as a caller and a father and this type of thing. When he became a rock drummer, he didn't have a driver's license. In our province at that time, you had to be 18 to have a driver's license. And he usually had 1 or 2 dates a month, sometimes 3 or 4. And Daddy had to drive him to the rock. And they weren't in Saskatoon. They were sometimes 50, 100, 200 miles out of town. And there's nothing more exciting than driving to a young person's rock concert and trying to sleep in the car.
Okay.
How do you, as a couple, work together to critique a dance? You've gone to a dance, be it good, bad, or indifferent, and I'm going to ask this couple over here to start. How do you get involved in critiquing the dance that your husband has called, and how does he usually respond?
You're right, very carefully. Well, sometimes I start out like, now listen, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but why don't you maybe think about taking a tape player with you and just see how many of this or that right and left throughs or whatever, something that you do. Now, I mean this from a good, I'm just telling you what I heard they say. No, I try and be very careful. Although one night I told him that, Liam, you have too much patience in teaching the class. That's just ridiculous to go on and on and on. If they can't get it, just tell them to get out. Looks like osmosis would sit in. He said, well, I'll tell you one thing. The next class, I'll let you teach, and you won't have to worry about another class because you'll run them all off. But overall, I think we do pretty good on that line. But I do sometimes tell him that I don't like that singing call. And lo and behold, if that's not the singing call he gets the most requests for. And he says, you see there? I guess the hardest thing was when Liam first started calling was I would be at a dance and I'd hear little remarks about his calling. And it kind of hurt my feelings. And I'm sure y'all have all gone through the same thing. I thought he was the best, and everybody else should think he's the best. And one night going home, he told me, he said, Sue, why don't you eat that strawberry ice cream? And I said, I don't like strawberry ice cream. And he said, right now, learn. Not everybody is going to like my calling. And so, it's kind of like the family. I can talk about them, but you better keep your mouth shut. But it has kind of made me learn to keep my mouth shut. Not much, but a little bit.
Sue is a very good critique of my dancing, my calling, because she's out there dancing. And she is intermingling with the dancers. She's also hearing what comes out over the speakers. And so I depend a whole lot on her as to give me little tips of what a certain figure feels like in the flow, if I haven't recognized that, or what the dancers feel about a certain singing call or a certain tip. And so I depend a great deal on her critique. And being she has the experience that she does have with dancing, she does a very good job of it. And I depend a whole lot on her input to my calling. And that's why one of the reasons that I appreciate her being at the dance.
But we made a deal. I'll always give him the suggestion on the way home, never at a dance.
Okay. Okay. I don't do that much critiquing, to say the least. I probably do, relatively speaking, in comparison to a lot of you. I do none. If I have a good time, Bill knows I'm having a good time. But when I have a good time at the dance, it could be because I'm dancing, it could be because I'm with friends, it could be because I'm enjoying, helping somebody clean up in the kitchen. It's probably not necessarily because of choreography. Choreography is not really where I'm at. I like to dance. I have a good time. I love the music, and the music is usually excellent, and I would say probably the only suggestion that I might make is to, occasionally suggest that, we've heard that singing call, and maybe he could try something else that I happen to hear because I'm hearing it, during the day or whatever, and there's a new record that I thought, he might be able to do that I would like. But basically, Bill is really fully in charge of his program, and he manages it, and it's not my department.
In reality, Peggy is very, very supportive of me. I'm usually intellectual enough to know when it's not gone well. My good friends Dick, Laurie, the Anfinsons, and there are enough other people out here, John and Freddie, have often been candid enough to let me know. George Meyer, one of our dancers in the area, very early on in what I'll refer to as the painful period, so middle of the first year period, and he'd come up to me after a dance and he'd say, "That third singing call was very good. I really like that. And the pattern's coming along fine." But it was really said with love and with caring and all that. But Peggy has been very, very supportive of my calling and all that, and there are enough good friends around to let me know. But as anybody who knows me, I'm not a high-tech caller. I'm a fun caller. I call relatively straightforward and straight out with good body flow and lots of really good music. And it's in fact the music programming that is at the core of my program. I program music, and my record case is organized by mood rather than by alphabet.
Probably the only thing that I have critiqued Bill about is that he takes his calling and his relationships with clubs and dancers very, very seriously. Sometimes, from where I stand, too seriously, and I have made that clear. But he has my full support in this activity for sure.
Well, I dance to Martin a lot, and I go with him. Now I go with him all the time. So I hear the same singing call a lot sometimes, and I'll say to Martin, you put that record on again, and I don't know. I think you should change. But this is just one of those things, and I do have a feeling for the floor every once in a while. I will say to Martin, hey, be careful here.
Actually, Terri never says anything to me from the floor. She is a very expressive person, a very expressive personality. All I have to do is look out on the floor. Sometimes I don't even have to look out on the floor. I may have my back picking up something out of the box, and there's something hits me in the back of the head. And she has the most expressive pair of brown. That's the first thing that attracted me to her, by the way, was her brown eyes. And she comes out and she goes, poof. And there's 2 marks right back here.
No, it's not quite that bad, but I know that Martin does know a lot of my expressions. I did hear a good one, though, today, where you could lift your lip like this, and that was too much, wasn't it? A new one for me.
Yeah, I've seen this expression once or twice when she wants me to stop calling something. But really, Terri is my best critic, and I do rely on her very, very much. And she will tell me if I'm doing things wrong. She has a very good sense of choreography. And if I call something that doesn't flow, she tells me immediately. She doesn't wait till after the dance. She'll come up and say, "Martin, that last thing you called, there's something wrong on the flow. Back off it until we've had a chance to talk about it. I don't use it again that night." And she does it in a nice way. You will stop that.
No, Martin. Tell the truth.
Not really. As you see, Terri and I play. And this is what our dancers say. They see the two of us playing with each other all the time at the club. Whoa! Did I say the right thing or the wrong thing? By that, I mean a play of personalities, a play of fun, and this type of thing.
You're going to get lots of bookings.
I'm going to be in trouble. I can see that. Yeah, but what I mean by that is interaction with each other all the time. Our dancers know us both very well, and they read both of us like a book. And we're very fortunate in that, so we get along well with that. Now, let's get on to another question before I put my foot in my mouth again. How involved are you in your club's activities? In other words, are you just the caller? Are you involved in the total operation of your club in some way? Is it a caller-run club? That's the type of question I'm asking now. Go ahead. I'm going to let Lem start this, and I'm going to ask Bill to start it when Lem's through.
I have two clubs I call for that are a little different. They are officer-run clubs. The third club that is a caller-run club, and that happens to be the advanced club that I have. One of the officer-run clubs is a club where a group of dancers that had danced previously and had been out of square dancing about 5 or 6 years decided to start again. So they came to me and asked if I would teach them and go through the changes in square dancing and start that club again. And I agreed to do it. And as a result of that, it's almost like a call-a-run club in that they pretty well depend upon Sue and I to answer every question that they might have. If it's so far as like booking callers for specials, they'll come and ask our opinion. And so it is almost a call-a-run club. But I do have a caller-run club on the advanced group. The Lafayette group is an officer-run club. In that they feel like the experience she has through the years of dancing, that they depend upon her a lot for her opinions on different subjects.
My good friend Dick Mazziotti gave me the old zip the lip sign, you know, that he was zipping his lip on the subject, and probably I should too, but I won't because it's not my style. I'm heavy, if you know me. I'm heavy into the concept of partnership, as you might imagine, between Peggy and myself. And I've always liked the concept of partnership on the dancing side too. We have no caller-run activities in our area; it's all club-run. The best business in our area right now is selling ammunition that some of the clubs are using to shoot themselves in the feet. There is a sort of a self-destruct movement on at a fair number of clubs, and we've heard this in other areas too. We know we do not have a monopoly on this. My home club that I came in as the club caller 13 years ago or whatever, after 10 years of calling for that club and teaching mainstreams for that club and not having had a single dancer from that club dance to me at another club, I knew it was time to back away from that club. I just really felt, you know, I'm not a short fuse kind of guy on these kinds of issues. I always will go more than halfway. I'll go 90% of the way. But I felt that I needed some kind of response back from that club, and we got absolutely none. Even after the discussion, we got absolutely none. And I finally, in fact, resigned first the teaching position, and then through a series of impolitenesses on their part, I, in fact, stopped calling for them. That was really only just one club. There are a couple of other clubs in the area where I've done some guest calling, where the relationships have been, at the very best, distanced or rocky. And then the reality is that most of the clubs in the area, whether it's Harmony or Lakeland, there are a number of very good clubs. It is a wonderful, wonderful partnership with those clubs. These are very, very nice people running very well-managed club that are financially sound. They're doing the right kind of marketing. They have the right kind of attitude. They are supportive not only of their home club caller. We have a lot of club caller, guest caller, mixed clubs in our area. But of guest callers coming in, they're very supportive. And I found that members of those clubs were, in fact, the ones who were, quote, traveling to the other clubs to dance to my dances. So that there is a very nice sense of community in a number of the clubs there. I'd have to be very candid with you. In our official home club, I was honestly never able to generate that. And I'm sad about that. I wish it were possible. Brief comment, as we move to New Hampshire, we're moving into the center of a triangle where there is a successful club, and a club that just folded last year for lack of membership, not for lack of money or success. And Peggy and I are going to have to try and restructure and redefine ourselves, to use Peggy's words, as to how we can constructively help in that community. But I can also tell you the politics are already ramping up there in the dancer community, and we're going to have to make some tough decisions as to how we can be helpful and constructive up there.
I should also make a comment that because we are pretty much in the public eye for other callers. We often get requests from callers who are in the area, either from other parts of the United States or occasionally from overseas, looking to us to, can you get me a dance? I'm going to be in your area. Can you get me a dance? And we really can't get them a dance because the callers are all hired by dancer-run organizations or clubs. There are, however, there have been occasional opportunities where we have been instrumental in putting together a dance with a club that we feel, or with clubs that we feel are receptive to this. We have something coming up this summer that we're both looking forward to, where a group is coming from Japan, being hosted by Pat Barber in Texas. And since we won't be living in the New Jersey area, we've joined with one of the clubs that Bill does a lot of guest calling for, and that club is sponsoring what we hope will be a really successful event, and we certainly are involved in helping them sponsor that event, and so in that way, that's the kind of thing that we enjoy doing.
Okay, now in our area we're rather fortunate. Our total province, I don't think we have, that I know of, more than one or two clubs that are actually run by callers. We are all committee-run clubs. If you want to call them that, they elect officers every year and do the whole schmear. They organize their dances. The only thing they do with their callers, most of them are permanent members of their executive. They're not just a hired person. They're a friend of the club. They're sought for advice and this type of thing. And it works out very well. We have our province is completely organized for square dancing, as is our whole country, really. We have our local associations. We have a provincial federation, and we have a Canadian society. And it's dancers and callers, not just dancers, not just callers. And we find that it's working very well. We have good rapport with our dancers, good rapport with our callers. I'm speaking generally. We still have the hotbeds where this Joe was fighting with John and things like that. That happens. That's a personality clash. It has nothing to do with square dancing. We do have caller-run classes and caller-run workshops, and it works well for us. We're fortunate in our own area. We have a hall right in our home. We train our dancers there. We do all the classes from mainstream right through to A1, and any workshops we want to do, we handle there. And I will say this about Terri: she is probably one of the nicest workmates I could have. Having this in our house, she provides the lunches, she does all the legwork, she does all the running up and down the stairs to get stuff down, and it's terrific. And I can't say enough thank yous to her for what she does to promote and help us square dancing. Oh, you want to bet. Let me tell you about one early domestic. We went right across the road over the curb, and it cost me $120 to have the front end fixed. I won't enlarge on it anymore. I'm sure Terri may have something. We should let the girls talk a little bit about this.
No, I just wish that some of y'all would ask some questions. I have never in my life, I have known John Jones for 30-some-odd years, and I have never seen him this quiet. Now, John, I know you have a question. And be nice to me.
I'll always be nice to you because she meets me halfway. I was thinking a hypothetical scenario that the ladies have said that you have been with the kids all day, you've worked in the house all day, you've had it up to here, you ain't going to the dance tonight. What makes you think that we may not have had a bad job, bad day at the office? The boss has been on our back. We may have almost gotten fired. What makes you think we're going out and having a good time?
Well, I would say to Lim, you're the one that wanted to be the caller.
Well, I'd probably feel sorry for him. But again, I guess you chose to be a caller, so I guess you have to get along with all these problems that you have.
I have an answer for that. Really, in our house, if my wife says to me, I do not want to go, I tell her to stay home. And you know what happens? She says to me, I'm going. The personality of wives is really something that I don't think a man will ever really understand, and I think that's why we love them dearly. We're not supposed to. If I had thought about it, I have a list that I garnered from somewhere that describes all the steps as to who is boss in the house. And one of the things is that the husband should never understand the decision the wife makes. And if the wife changes her mind, he still should not try to understand it. Wayne.
Hi, I'm Wayne Marvant from Beaumont, Texas. I'm very fortunate that I have a job that my wife can go with me to work. And that is, I call square dances full time. It is also very fortunate that I believe that we consider this is my job, and she certainly does not have to go to work with me, but it's very good that she can. One thing that I have a small problem with, maybe it's not small because I'm thinking about doing some writing on a subject, the caller's wife has no name. I introduce my wife at dances. She loves to dance. She loves to go. She would rather dance every tip than sit there, and she will dance everything in between every tip. And I do make a point to introduce her, but oftentimes there are still lonely times for her when I'm calling 5 nights a week, every week, 6 some and 7 often. Do you have any suggestions how I feel that I'm at work and I am there hired to do something, and I don't spend my time seeing to it that my wife is entertained. She does not have to go to work with me, and she knows that. But sometimes I still do feel a little guilty when I see she is sitting and no one is talking with her. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Well, you know, sometimes I wished I could be one of those dancers that would go and just sit on the sideline and be quiet and try and look pretty. If they need somebody to fill a tip, I'm one of those that'll just jump up and say, anybody want to dance with me? I don't really, that's kind of a touchy situation, Wayne, because maybe a caller could say, I would like to introduce my wife, Carolyn. Now, Carolyn loves to dance. If anybody would like to take a break and let their husband dance with my wife, she would be thrilled to dance with you. Wouldn't you, Carolyn? I don't.
I think we may have just gotten the intellectual answer. Okay, I got to be honest with you. We've been talking about this subject for years now, and I've never heard a solution that works. I think the solution was just delivered up here. It was apparently brought up in one of the prior sessions, so if you were there, forgive me. Margaret, would you like me to explain, or would you like to do it? Go ahead. Okay, sure. Do you want to do it? There is a small chalkboard, and it is entitled Margaret's Dance Card. It has 1 through 8 down the left-hand side. There's a piece of chalk attached with a string to the bottom of the board. And at the beginning of the evening, JR, presumably her partner or husband, introduces her and says, Margaret's dance card is sitting over here, and if you'd like to dance with her this evening, please sign up. She can dance as belle or beau. She dances all levels. Please sign up to dance for her. Is it successful? Can somebody tell me, is it actually working? Yeah, told it was. And it looks like a very clever idea. One of the things that has always annoyed me, and it annoys me more than it annoys Peggy, is I have been to dances, and I've called 7 or 8 tips, whatever the evening might be, and she has not danced a single time. And I got to tell you, I am offended. I am offended. Peggy is not offended. She is much more tolerant of that. As long as somebody will talk to her, she can have fun in the kitchen. I mean, Peggy's very flexible and all that, but what it really is to me is it's basically impolite, if nothing else. And the other thing is, sometimes when she's not being asked to dance, she's paid no social attention either. And I find that devastating. I find that, from where do we get these dances? Were these people raised in a barn? And I mean that exactly the way I said it. Would you ever totally ignore somebody if you were hosting an evening? And I think that we have to, in our classes, mention this as an issue, not in a denigrating kind of way or a negative kind of way, but simply let the dancers know that it is courtesy. Just as you ask them not to walk through the center of a square that's already been formed, it is also courteous to ask the partner of the caller if they would like to dance occasionally.
I had that sort of experience about 7 dances in a row and did not dance at all. And I don't feel that I'm a wallflower at all. And people knew I was there. So I wrote an article to our local publication about some of the courtesies that we no longer teach or have fallen by the wayside. And it used to be that the president of the club always asked the caller's wife to dance at least one night, at least one tip that night. That has sometimes fallen out. We don't see that courtesy. But I did write a letter in sort of a comical way and editorially about some of those courtesies and about dance cards. And we see in our area, because we do strictly guest calling, there are very few caller-run clubs, we see the dance cards appear, and it is really a courtesy. It is right there on the table as the people come in. It is predominantly the club members that do sign up to dance with you. It's very successful, and we're seeing it more and more in the Southern California area.
There's another question right down. Okay, thank you.
I'm Norma Alexander from Cranston, Rhode Island. Conversely, if I decide to go with my husband to a dance, but for some reason, be it physical, emotional, or mental, I don't want to dance, if he says, my wife is in the audience, she'd be glad to talk to you, however, she can't dance tonight. People shouldn't come up and expect you to fill in a square if that kind of thing is done.
I'm Ed Gilson from Adrian, Michigan, and my wife is a caller, and you haven't talked about that too much. So what I want to really say is that dancers will come to me, and I'm not on the mic very much, so you have to excuse me. They'll come up and say, "Oh, you're the partner's caller." Well, I'm not a hauler. I'm Phyllis's partner. And if she starts doing that, she can start paying me a wage, which she doesn't. But I do help her. She maintains the calendar. We go at it. If I'm dancing and Peggy and Bill happen to be there, since I know them well, I can talk about it, and Bill is out talking and I want to dance, I'll just grab Peggy and go dance. If he don't like it, he can cut me out. This is the way I work with my dancers. If I don't want to dance, we're at a strange club, I just stay at the sideline. Sometimes Phyllis will say, "My husband is with me, Ed's out there, he loves to dance." She doesn't say, "You got to," or anything like that. So I have a hard time presenting things, but it's just a little bit different. The thing that I like to say most is I'm not her hauler, I'm her partner, and I love to dance.
I think that's terrific. We as callers, I think we have an obligation to introduce our partners and make it known that they are available to dance if it is their wish. If it is not their wish, if they have a sprained ankle or something like that, make it known. Tell them why, if it doesn't embarrass them, your wife. That's the one thing you want to be very careful of. If you say things like that embarrass your partner, I'll use the word partner rather than wife. I didn't realize we had some male partners here, and I apologize to you because some of those. How many male partners have we got here? Very good, very good. I would just wish you guys had become active sooner. We have a lady standing, please.
Gay Chevalier from Dayton, Ohio. When I go to a dance, I love to dance, and I don't seem to have any problem dancing, but I'm more concerned about the single that may come that doesn't have anyone to dance with. And if someone should ask me and I get up and I look around and see someone single, I'll say, "You know, so-and-so doesn't have a partner," and I gladly relinquish my spot to them. I feel almost like a hostess no matter where I go, to make sure that the people are there that are having a good time. Maybe that's...
I think the expression that she has used there is very, very appropriate. Your wife is the hostess. Right. We always tell callers when we're teaching them, if you can, if your wife comes with you and you go to a hall, you are in your home extension, and you are the host. Your wife is the hostess. And that goes across very well if you can establish that relationship.
And in this case, at least you had the option. You had the option to be gracious to that single who is standing there, and I certainly don't disagree with your feeling of obligation as the hostess, but at least you were given the courtesy of an invitation to dance. And very often Peggy and I will do that if we are dancing, not calling, and we're dancing and we see that the caller's wife is not dancing all out, we'll split our tip. I'll do the patter with Peggy, do the singing call with the caller, or if there's a single there, I'll say, Peggy, hang on, let me go ask this young lady to dance, and I'll bring her in for the singing call, or we'll split it. But the other thing is, frankly, I also want to dance with Peggy, too. There were two questions, one here and then Bob in the back.
Sylvia Irvin, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I do not have a question, I have a statement to make. Martin, you did say something about only a caller. I think you deserve more than that. I have not seen a square dance club operate without a caller. I think you're very special people, and you deserve all the backings or support that a club can give you. So that's not a very good statement when you say only a caller, and that's for the guys and the gals that are callers. Okay?
I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't mean it in the phrase. I'm not sure just where I said that, but a caller is, when I said only a caller, I think I used it in the text of being hired as a caller and doing the dance and not being a part of the club. And I think I'm not sure just where I used it. If I used it out of the context, I'm very sorry. A caller is a partner to square dancing. I think that's a better way of looking at it. But so's his wife. So's is her husband, as the case may be. We're part and part of square dancing. And I see one of our grand gentlemen of square dancing here, Mr. Bob Osgood, standing with a mic in his hand, and I think he really has something to say. Bob is a terrific gentleman. You're on, Bob.
I hardly know what to say. No two situations are exactly alike. One that we have solved in a club, it's not a real large club, it's been going for quite a while, and they're very fond of Becky, and Becky loves to dance. And we have solved that with a door prize. And I emphasize adore. They, at the beginning of the evening, have these double strips of tickets. And anybody who would like to take one of them, the other end goes in the basket, and they keep one. We select during the evening 14 different draws, half for each, just a half a tip. So a person only loses their husband for half a tip. And it works very well. Becky gets to dance. Sometimes she almost dances too much. But try the adore prize sometime. It works for us.
You had me worried for a minute when you said adore. I gather that's one word.
Hi, my name is Gail Gordon. I'm from Stowe, Massachusetts. I wanted to take exception to the statement just made about that the partner is the hostess. I think that partners may choose to be the hostess, but they are not the hostess. Again, I encourage partners to think about what role they want to play in the partnership. And it may be that they choose to sit and read a book. It may be that they choose to dance. It may be that they choose to greet and be part of the activity. But there has to be a choice. And so I'm just bristling a little bit about...
I apologize, Gail.
Okay, thank you.
I seem to be leading with my foot in my mouth at times.
I would suggest if you would like to read a book, you might better stay home, because anything that looks really bad is the caller's wife to come in, sit in a corner, and do her knitting, not visit with anybody. Personally, that's the way I feel.
How many remember Winnie Goetcher? I'm curious. She used to study law. Gentlemen?
I'm John Chevalier from Dayton, Ohio. And when we started calling, one of the things we agreed upon is that we would dance once a week, regardless of the calling schedule. And we've managed to do that for the last 13 years. And we do get around to visit a lot of the clubs in the area. And our relationship with the clubs is a little different than a pure caller dancer relation, because we are still considered dancers when we go out. We're also considered as a caller. And we feel it's a different relationship that we have with many of the clubs.
Thank you. I'm going to go into a wrap-up mode. The little gentleman here will be the last one on the
You go right ahead.
Yes, I'm Al Singleton from Houston, Texas. My wife and I were fortunate enough to be in the UK as well as in Texas. And one thing I wanted to say is my wife has been a big asset to me as a caller, both as we ran a caller run club in the UK as well as Texas. And when I'm out guest calling, I would say one thing, it adds a lot to me, and whenever people see my wife come in and be a part of what I'm representing, I think that adds a whole lot. And I know there's a lot of times when the wives can't go, but as many times as the wives can go, I think it adds tremendously to what I'm trying to represent when my wife is along, because they see that in her. Okay?
I'd like to say one thing. I have found out who the most important person in our calling team is. I go to clubs that know us very well. They call me Terry. And if Terry is not with me, they never say, "Hi, Martin." The first word they say is, "Where's Terry?"
It's not quite like that.
So I know who the most important partner. And Peggy?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
John just came up and whispered a good question, which I thought was very good because it has happened in our clubs. What do you do as a caller's wife when one of the members, either at your club or on a Saturday night special, asks you to dance? He's very rough, or he doesn't smell the best in the world. We have run across both of those situations. In one of our clubs, we had a gentleman who, when he would walk in the door, the odor was just terrific. His clothes were very, very dirty. He would always ask me to dance, and at first I hated to refuse him because I felt sorry for the old gentleman. But after a while, it just got where I was smelling my clothes because it felt like the odor stayed with me. And we went to the club president, and we suggested that the club president needs to talk to this gentleman, either to bathe or that he's just had too many complaints. And that deal was worked out. The other deal is someone that is so very, very rough. If it's in my club, I don't mind saying, "Hey, you're about to break my arm off," or I use my height. "I'm so tall, you're about to kill me." But those are some problems, and I'm sure that some of y'all have had the same thing.
Just one comment. Somebody made the comment about when my wife can't go, and I think this maybe speaks to Gail's comment before. Whether we can or we can't, the real choice is, what do we choose to do, and are we comfortable with that choice? There are times when I really couldn't go because I had other demands made upon me. There were other times when I really didn't want to go, and the important thing is to work out with your partner, to communicate fully enough to have that choice.
I'd like to comment one thing about the roughness in square dancing. We have instituted one thing in two of our clubs that have had the incidents of roughness. We instituted an ouch night. And if any dancer run into something rough, it was their privilege to say in a loud voice on the floor, "Ouch!" And it's rather surprising how it smoothed the dancing out very quickly. Because if somebody says ouch when you stick a thumb in their arm when it's not supposed to be, or they jerk you off your feet and you say ouch, it stops very quickly. Think about it. At this point, we're due for lunch. We're due to wind up. I'd really sincerely like you to give a hand to Sue and Lem and to Bill and Peggy here, or Peggy and Bill. I think they were real great couples to have on our... And to my wife, Terri, she swore she was not going to talk on the mic, and I think she did a tremendous job. And I'd like...
And thank you to Martin for